Welcome, friends, to this episode of the Sync Your Life podcast. Today, I'm being joined by my new friend, Dr. Justin Moseley. He's also known as the Mindset Doctor. He's got his own podcast called The Mindset Doctor, which we'll be sure to link up. He's a former chiropractor turned international speaker and transformation coach. He's also a TEDx speaker, so you can find him by searching for his TED Talk as well, and we'll link that up also. But I'm super excited for us to come together. We met a few weeks ago and just chatted and got to know each other, and his story is so powerful. I can't wait for you guys to hear his story and for him to really speak into you on the topic of just mindset and personal growth. This is a topic that's really near and dear to my heart. You guys know that even though we talk hormones most of the time, I also like to make sure that we're addressing the whole person, right? Not just their physical wellness, but also their emotional well-being. So without further ado, Dr. Moseley, Dr. Justin Moseley, welcome to the show. I'd love for you to just start things off by introducing yourself and tell us your story. Like, how did you get here and all that stuff? Go for it.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Happy to be here. Dr. Justin Moseley, the Mindset Doctor. I'm a chiropractor by trade. My wife's a chiropractor as well. We have a functional medicine clinic outside of Nashville, Tennessee, and we opened that back in 2012 and started helping people, serving the community, built a very successful practice. And then in 2018, everything changed for me. I went on a men's retreat and we went whitewater rafting, and the raft tipped over. And I was sitting in the back of the raft and I got trapped underneath the rapid, and the rapid started pushing me under. And I still remember the sound of my helmet scraping down the rocks as I was being pushed underwater. And the last thing I remember thinking is, I'm not coming back up. And everything turned black, and then everything turned bright white. And it was the most peaceful, serene feeling I'd ever felt. And then I don't know how long that lasted. It felt like an eternity, but it's probably very short. But I heard this voice that said, wake up. And thankfully I did, because when I came back to consciousness, I was trapped underwater, wedged between two rocks. And I tried to push and I didn't budge. And I kept pushing. And then finally my adrenaline kicked in. If anybody's ever been held underwater a little too long, you know what that feels like when that adrenaline kicks in. And I was able to push hard enough that I broke the buckle on my life jacket that was trapped underneath one of the rocks. And I was able to float to the top. So got swept down the river. Adrenaline was still pumping. I was like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I was rocked. And it was a wake up call for me, because we all question our purpose in life. Like, why am I here? But after that, I asked a new question. I said, why am I still here? Because things could have been different in that moment. What if I didn't hear wake up? What if I wasn't strong enough to break free and actually free myself? So I was like, I know I'm here for a bigger purpose. And the thing was, I was living my purpose. I was helping people. I was making a difference, but I realized I was playing way too small. I knew there was a calling in my life to help people all over the world, not just locally in our community. So I shifted gears. My wife took over the practice and I started putting out content. And because I stepped back, I was like, if money wasn't the issue, if I could just do something that brought me joy and helped a lot of people, what would I do? So I started putting out content on mindset and personal development because it changed my life and I know it could help other people. But even at first, I was like, I don't know if anybody's going to listen. I'm just going to put myself out there. You probably know the feeling. It's like when you start a podcast, it's like, I hope people listen. But you just get out, you just have the heart to serve, and the people show up. And that's what happened. I started a Facebook group, the Mindset Doctor Facebook group, in the first of 2020, and 1,000 people joined in the first month. So I was like, okay, people are listening. This is awesome. And it just kind of just took off from there. It was really just my heart to know, and my message that came actually from my near-death experience, because I realized I was comfortable. And I knew if I really wanted to step into the calling that was on my life, I needed to exchange my comfort for my calling. And I think there's a lot of people out there that have gotten comfortable, and comfortable looks different to everyone. It can be comfortable when things aren't going your way, but you're comfortable, so you don't want to change, or things can be going really well and you get comfortable there. But if you know there's something bigger for you, it's time to exchange your comfort for your calling.
Yeah, that's so amazing. That's probably the best introductory story that I've ever had on the podcast. So, I mean, I love this. And actually, your story reminds me a lot of Brendan Burchard. He always talks about his near-death car accident, and very similar, right? He always says he had this feeling or this messaging to him of like, you're not done, right? Like, you're not done. You have a greater purpose. For you, it's why am I still here? And I love that. So this is something that is not new. This whole idea is something that I've talked about on the podcast a lot. This idea of like being willing to get outside your comfort zone. And of course, it always starts with awareness. In your story, it was like the awareness happened to you, like something happened to you to like really shock you into that awareness. That's not always the case for everybody. Not everybody's going to be, you know, trapped in a rapid and have that sort of near-death experience. So what I like to do just to start this off is to really talk about like, what does comfort look like? And how can someone really recognize that maybe they're meant for more?
Yeah, and I totally agree. Like most people aren't going to ever have a near death accident. But the problem is most people, they have to have an accident. Somebody dies around them or they have a rock bottom moment before they actually change. And that's part of my message to help people realize like you don't need that type of wake up call. You can change today. You can have the awareness like you talked about, have the awareness of what's going on around you and say, hey, you know what? I can change and I can do this. So that's the first piece is really the awareness there. I'm sorry, I forgot your question on that.
Yeah, no, just really just helping people understand like what does comfort look like? Because I think when you get too comfortable, you can, you know, it's almost like you could be listening to this thinking we're talking about somebody else, you know, because you're so comfortable in that comfort zone. So I'd love to really make sure that people know and kind of bring that awareness to them as they're listening.
Yeah. And so for comfort for me, because life was good, business was good. I was helping people. I was making a difference. I was traveling with my wife. I was doing things that I'd always dreamt of doing, but I knew there was a calling for more. And that was where I realized there was a comfort zone. And if I had never had that near death accident, I might not have woken up to the fact that I had gotten comfortable. So you really have to look at your circumstances and say, what's going around me? And really, it comes down to the purpose. Like, what are you here for? And that's why I liked that I came to that question of why am I still here? Because it had me question my purpose. I'm here for a bigger reason. And I think anybody listening, you're here for a bigger reason.
Yeah.
Like, and a lot of times we don't give ourselves the space to really contemplate because the reality is we go through the routines of our daily life and we have 60 to 90,000 thoughts per day. 90% of our thoughts are the same every single day because we're just in these habits, these patterns, these routines. We need to shift out of that and think, okay, and a lot of times I've been in this transformational space for years. A lot of people think I need a complete 180 transformation. No, most people, it's a 1 degree shift. A 1 degree shift here, a 3 degree shift there can change everything for you. So just being aware, and I think that's really what it comes to is giving yourself the space to question things around you. Question, where am I comfortable? I don't think it's a question of, are you comfortable? I think it's where you're comfortable. And I do get the question a lot of like, but shouldn't we be happy? Like, why do we need to go for more? And I think we should learn to be content in any situation. Be happy with where you're at, but don't be complacent. Because I think it's the contentment plus the complacency is what really leads to comfort. And your comfort is the enemy of your calling.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to know what the process looked like for you. So after this like near-death experience, and then you realize like, okay, I have more, like there's a larger calling on my life. What process did you go through to figure out what that was for you? Like, or was it just more about sharing that story and you know, really getting people aware?
Yeah, and it was a processing period. So it wasn't just an aha, I'm going to shift gears and do something else. It was really giving myself the space to say, what would I do different? How can I make the bigger impact? How can I really step into a calling that's much bigger? What would that look like? So for me, I looked at, and this is being part of brand builders, Rory Vaden has the quote, you're most powerfully positioned to serve the person you once were. So I started looking at my past and thinking, man, well, what lights me up? And it was the fact that I'd studied mindset and personal development because I struggled with self-confidence, self-esteem issues, all those things. And the personal development work that I did actually helped me overcome that. So I was like, I want to give that back to other people. And I was never looking to start a business and start coaching and doing the things that I'm doing now. I just wanted to put it out to serve people. And because I did that, then people leaned into it. And it's led to me running retreats and mastermind groups and the things that I'm doing now. But it all came from me thinking, okay, what lights me up? And thinking about that person that I once was. Like I needed the Jack Canfields and the Tony Robbinses and all the people. I read my first Tony Robbins book when I was 16. I still have the original copy. And I was like, I want to be what they were for me. I want to be that for other people.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many people listening, like the stuff that you've been through in life, you've learned so many lessons. You can pay that forward to the people that are going through what you went through.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. I think, we're both obviously part of Brand Builders Group, and I love that. I find myself saying, you're most qualified to serve the person you once were. I say that at least daily to people.
Mm-hmm.
But my storyline aligns very similar to yours. In 2020, I started to feel this feeling like I was made for more. Like I almost felt like I wanted to challenge myself in a new way, or I just felt like I was too comfortable. And that feeling came, that awareness came from being somebody that invested in personal growth, from being somebody who was constantly around sort of like higher thinking. And so, right, like listening to the Tony Robbins and those types of people, like you start to, you really push yourself a little bit more, because you're like, wait, like I now have this sort of, I always call it like 60,000 foot view of my life because of that personal development that I'm doing. And so I had a similar experience where in 2020, I was like, I don't know what it is, but I'm meant for more. And I just kept, I'm a Christian, I'm like very faith-based. And so I started praying about it. I started just talking to my husband about it. I'm like, I don't know what it is, but like something is just pulling me. And then I heard Rory on a podcast, and he literally said, you're most qualified to serve the person you once were. And I've heard that before in different ways. I've heard, your avatar, blah, blah, all these different things. And I thought, for some reason, that just hit me at the right time. And I was like, of course I am. Right. And it was so funny because in 2020, every year on the first of the year, I always set a word for the year. And my word that year was serve. And so I had chosen the word serve, wasn't really sure why. Then I started having these feelings. Then I heard him on a podcast, and I just thought, all of this is like divine timing. It's all coming into play at the same time. And so it's interesting because as soon as I decided to like serve the woman I once was, the woman who's struggling with hormone imbalance, the woman who's feeling a little bit lost or a little bit crazy, when I started doing that, it's amazing, like the people and even the voices in your head that will start to say like, well, who are you to do that? Like you're not credible. Like, for me, it's like, well, you're not a doctor, or you're not this, or you're not that, right? Like I even had my own family be like, what? Like, what are you doing? But I think back to, and I shared this recently on the podcast, it was another personal growth speaker that I was talking to recently. And I told him, I heard Ed Milet talk recently on a podcast about how the person who saved his dad's life, his dad was an alcoholic, was another alcoholic. Right. And it's the person who's been through it, the person who knows and feels and has had all those experiences is the person who's best suited to help you get through it. And so I just think that's so powerful. So I'd love to kind of talk about that like briefly. And I want to go back to what you said earlier about a 1 degree shift too. So that's in my notes to come back to, but I want to ask, how can we really empower people, I guess, to realize like the struggles that they've overcome are most likely connected to their purpose?
Yeah, I think it comes back to awareness too, to really give ourselves space to think. Because really everything, your outer world, your circumstances, the results that you're seeing are a reflection of your inner world. Your own thoughts, feelings, and actions over time are giving you the results that you're having, which is really powerful if you understand that, okay, if I don't like the circumstances that I'm seeing, I can change those. I can change my thoughts, my feelings, my actions. I can show up differently and get different results. And as we start to reflect on these things, we do get a higher level of awareness. And I think that's what you had. It was the divine timing you talked about. And there's that saying of when the student's ready, the teacher will show up. It's like when we're ready to receive, these lessons will come to us. And I look at it, it's like a radio. So there's radio waves all around us all the time, but you need to turn your radio station into the right station in order to receive the frequency. If you turn it to one station, you're listening to country music. You turn it to another one, you're listening to rock music. You have to tune in to what you want to receive. And that's where powerful things like surrounding yourself with other like-minded people that are growth-minded, positive-minded, and doing positive affirmations, visualizations of what you want to create. You get to tune in to a higher frequency and create better things in your life. So I think that's part of it. And then realizing you're not alone when you have the voices in your head. We all have those. And I like to tell people you have to speak louder than the voices in your head, because you will have those voices. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not worthy enough. All those things will come up. You have to speak louder than those voices, or those voices will hold you back. Even for me, like I almost failed a speech class in college because I was terrified of public speaking. I had a panic attack during my speech. So I created this story in my head of public speaking is not for you. You should not do this. And it's a story I believed for way too long. Fast forward years later, I get accepted to speak at TEDx, which was a bucket list thing of mine. Like, man, would that be awesome to do that? But then all those voices started. Who are you to do this? Like even Rory Vaden, who we just talked about, I think he got denied 11 or more times to even do a TEDx, and he's a New York Times bestselling author. Like, who am I to do this? But then the reality, the shift that I had was, who am I not to do this? I know that I have a message to share for people, and you never know if somebody will hear this. You never know what that will mean to them. And it was really cool. There's a comment on my YouTube. So my TEDx talk is on YouTube, and there's a lady who wrote, my 9-year-old daughter, we watched your TEDx talk. My 9-year-old daughter said, I want to wake up with a purpose. And it was like, how cool is that? So realizing for you listening, you all have a story to tell. The things that you went through are going to uplift other people. They're going to make a difference in their lives. So we got to get out of our own head and be open. That's why I love that you're doing this podcast, because this is a chance to get your voice out to the world. Somebody's listening to this, and it's going to make a difference in their life. And a lot of people get caught up on, they want to make their purpose so big, like Mother Teresa or things like that. And it makes us feel really small. But you know what? Maybe your purpose today is just to put a smile on somebody's face. Maybe your coworkers, you just need to uplift somebody today. Like if you did that every single day, that's a huge purpose. So don't get caught up on it has to be so big. But one of the things I thought of when you were telling your story was, I think the only really true way to see what's possible for us is to push for what we think is impossible. Because if we don't ever push what we think we can do, we will always stay comfortable. We'll stay within our own limits. But when we start to test and start to say, well, I really think this is impossible, but I'm going to go for it, a lot of times we surprise ourselves and we actually achieve what we once thought was impossible for us.
Mm-hmm. She went rogue on us. Sorry about that.
No worries.
He thought she was with him and whatever. Anyways, okay. Yeah, no, I love all that. And I wrote down push for what's impossible. And I also, everything you were saying made me think of, this whole idea of like, most of the time we are in our own way. Like the thing that's holding us back is all of our negative self-talk and all the things that we tell ourselves that just isn't true. I also loved what you said about the public speaking thing. Like, it's the meaning that we attach to things that sometimes holds us back. Like you would attach a meaning to public speaking. I can't do that. It makes me scared. I had a panic attack, right? It's not until you say, okay, I'm going to embrace what's impossible. I'm going to push for what's impossible, that you finally overcome it. I want to come back to this idea of like the 1 degree shift, because I really think that this is a powerful concept. This is how I started in personal growth, was with the book, The Slight Edge. And he talks about like the airplane, if the airplane wants to land in New York, even if it's just 1 degree off from its course, how much further it will land from New York, right? Like that's the whole idea. And I think you're totally right in that a lot of people think that it's a 180 or it's like a complete huge shift in their life, when in reality, it's just the small changes, right? Like my clients in the health and wellness field, I work with women specifically, and a lot of times it's really as simple as, let's start with something manageable. Like let's start with, like drinking more water. Like it doesn't have to be the full on exercise plan and change your diet this week and meal prep and do all the things like this week. Like people think it is, they think they have to do the whole thing. But in reality, it's like, let's start with the water and go from there. So I'd love for you to just touch on that 1 degree shift.
Yeah. And it's with health too, because I'm in the health space as well. Like when you do everything, then you don't even really know what actually worked. So I like starting with the little changes. Maybe drink more water, doing gratitude, like those kind of things. The mindset piece is so big in the health piece, because limiting the stress, that's the cause of a lot of health issues anyways. So by doing the little things, you can actually see the biggest difference. And this one's been a game changer for me. And it's the way anybody listening, you should listen to the rest of her podcasts with this in mind. Listen for insights, not information. And that's what I do when I'm listening to podcasts, books, videos, the stuff that I'm watching. I'm not watching it or listening to it for the information. I'm looking for the insights, because it's in the insights. I call them mind shifts. My coaching is called mind shift, but those insights become game changers because those insights speak to you for a reason. And if you act upon that insight, that's the one thing that can completely change everything for you. And I tell this to people a lot when they go to seminars and they take a bunch of notes and like, this stuff's amazing. And usually they don't look at their notes ever again after that seminar. One of the best things you can do is take the notes, but actually highlight what are the biggest aha moments, those insights that spoke to you. Really process, why did that speak to me? And then go act on that. And you guys have notebooks that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars of information in those because of the insights. If you acted on those versus the next book you need to read or the next thing that you need to do, because you don't need more information. You need to listen for the insights and act on those.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to tell when we would go to, health conferences and stuff with my team of health coaches, this was before COVID and all that kind of stuff. I used to say, leave the first page in your notebook empty. And that way, when you're done, you can go back and take all the things that you learned and say, what are the 5 to 10 things that I can easily do in the next couple months, right? Not tomorrow, but like in the next couple months, like how can I make this? That's probably one of the biggest shifts that I made, was going from being somebody who was just a sponge that was just like soaking everything up. And like, yeah, I was into personal development and I was listening to all the podcasts and I was going to all the conferences and taking all the notes, like you said. It wasn't until I finally was like, you know what? I need to just start the action piece. Like I need to start making that actual 1 degree shift. Like I need to take one thing from everything I listen to and apply it. Right. And it kind of goes back to, I've shared this before, but it's worth mentioning, like my life coach always talks about like, well, are you trying to do something or are you committed to doing something? Right. Like changing that language in our heads. So I want to talk more about too, this idea. I like what you said earlier about the radio and tuning into a higher frequency. What would you say, like for someone listening who feels like, okay, I'm intrigued by this, like, I've been feeling this calling lately that I need to look into, pursuing more for myself. What would you say the best first step is for somebody? Like, what would you plug into if you were in that position?
The first thing that I would say is create the vision for where you want to go. Because if without vision, people perish. And one of the best stories I like about vision is Walt Disney was a huge visionary, created Disney World, Disneyland, Epcot. And when they built Epcot, and Walt Disney actually passed away before it opened. And they were doing a press conference. They interviewed his brother, Roy Disney, and they asked him, isn't it a shame that Walt's not here to see this? And he said, Walt did see this. And because he saw this is why you see it today. And it went back to the vision that he had. That's how he sees this. So the vision is what gives us direction. And then we can backtrack from there. Once you have the vision of who you want to become, because anything we achieve in life is not about what we get or what we do. It's who do we need to become in order to achieve that. So if we get the vision of it, then I would start with podcast. Who's speaking about this? What are rooms that I can get to and surround myself with like-minded people that are on the path of where I want to go? Hire mentors, coaches. I did this a lot, from hiring coaches, joining mastermind groups. I called it writing a check to go faster. If there's somebody out there that I could pay to help me get a result that I want to achieve in faster time, it is worth it. But start with the books, start with the podcasts. But going back to what you said, because I was the self-help junkie, I learned this from experience. I used to read 100 books a year. I did that for over 10 years because I loved consuming knowledge. And I think that there's definitely a good thing to that. But the realization I came to was it came from a place where I felt like I wasn't enough. I felt like that next book I needed to read is going to give me some new knowledge that I need. No, you are enough right now. Now it's figuring out, okay, in my own enoughness, what am I called to do with that? And I heard a quote that I love. It's like God's gift to us is the potential that he's given us. Our gift to God is what we do with that potential. So us developing our own potential to use it in a way that brings honor and glory to him, I think is what this is all about. But it comes back to you got to get the vision first, because the vision will show you what are the next best steps. But podcast, YouTube videos, those are the free stuff that you can do that can help you get to that vision.
Yeah, and I love what you said too about like if you're wanting to get somewhere faster, find someone who's gone before you and done it, and then
Yep, absolutely.
pay them for their help, right? That's what we've done.
Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, this is so good, and I just think that one thing that comes to my mind right now is I'm working with sync certified coaches, so women who've come into my program who are becoming certified, sharing the message of just hormone health in general with other women. And the one thing that I find myself saying to them often is, this is just a personal belief of mine, that women should become more vulnerable in the service of other women. That it's not okay. I mean, so many of us have stories about being gaslit, right? Like telling our doctors we don't feel well, and then the doctor says, "Oh, everything's normal," right? This is just aging, or this is whatever. This happens way too much, and we don't talk about things like periods. We don't talk about society in general doesn't talk about menstrual cycles, and so this whole concept of like teaching women cycle syncing and really becoming vulnerable and talking more about being a woman, right, takes courage and takes that vulnerability. So I think that's sometimes part of it too, is we realize that we are equipped to serve the person we once were, but sometimes it's also taking that next step of being vulnerable enough to share what that looked like, right? And
Absolutely.
that can be a really, really hard thing to go through.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to like when you listen for the insights that I was talking about. So step one is get the insight. Because if you're not tuned into the radio station, the radio waves are all around you, but you'll never hear it. So tune in so you can get the insight. Second is act upon it. But then third is share that insight with others. Because if something spoke to you, it will probably speak to someone else. And that's where the vulnerability piece comes in. And I run mastermind groups, and it was kind of cool. We have a message for one of the groups, a group message. And one of the women put this long story in there. And because she got vulnerable and actually shared, it allowed the safe space for other women to actually say, "Hey, this happened to me. I want to share about this." And it opened a dialogue where one, it was healing for the first woman to actually share it, to get vulnerable and share. But then it created that safe space that's going to allow healing for the other women. And I think that's what's powerful with what you said. Be vulnerable for yourself, because you get to get it out. And because when we hold it in, it creates fear, worry, anxiousness. All these things lead to the dis-ease and the disease process in our bodies. So one, we need to get it out for our own good, but get it out for other people.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we show up for other people better than we do ourselves. I think about if you had an accountability partner saying, "We're going to meet at the gym every single day at 5 a.m., alarm goes off, you don't want to let that person down. But if it's just up to you saying a New Year's resolution, "I'm going to work out at 5 a.m. every day," well, pretty soon that alarm goes off. You're like, "Yeah, I'm a little tired. I'm just going to sleep in today." And then all of a sudden that becomes your new habit, missing the gym because you're sleeping in. When you have that accountability partner, you show up. So same thing with this. If you can't do it for yourself to be vulnerable for those other women, and think about how you can empower them. And when you do that, you actually get to show up for yourself as well.
Yeah, I just had a woman yesterday tell me that she said, "Okay, guys," she was telling a group of us, she said, I finally got the courage to like go live on my social media and share my story and share what's going on. And she goes, "I can't believe how many other women are reaching out to me saying like, thank you for sharing. Oh my gosh." Right. But it was interesting because she said, "I'll be honest with you guys. I did it for my 17-year-old daughter." And she was like, "I didn't do it for me. I did it for her," because it's one of those things where like when you realize, what you're not, like kind of what you were talking about earlier, what you're not doing, like when I think about my 2 and 6-year-old daughters, I think about, well, I don't want them to experience this. Like, I don't want them to go through this. And so I have to share my story, right? Because I don't want this for them. And so I think, yeah, it's such a cool thing to think about. Like, if we're willing to go through that transformation, if we're willing to step into our purpose, if we're willing to say, okay, yes, I am made for more. I think 99% of the cases, we also have to be okay with sharing the parts of our story that are going to resonate with other people that are in that struggle that we've been through. So
yeah. And something that just came to me, I've been sharing a lot lately that I think will be valuable with this conversation. Because step one, a lot of us are in that victim mentality. Life's happening to us, and we blame the circumstances around us, the stuff that we've been through. One shift we need to make is life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us.
Yeah.
Even the bad, even the stuff that's going on around us, when we realize it's happening for a purpose, it changes the way and that's the old saying, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. So you
Mhm.
no longer see it as stuff that will hold you back, but can actually propel you forward. So
Yeah.
step one, life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. But usually that's where people stop. But there's other levels. So life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us. But then the next level is it happens by us. Like we create the circumstances around us. So
Mhm.
the way we think about it, the way we feel about it, the way we act about it. Now, a lot of people have been through traumatic stuff, and it's not your fault that that happened. But what you can change is the way you're viewing it.
Mhm.
There's a story of two brothers. One was homeless and one was a huge success. And they interviewed the two. The homeless one got strung out on drugs and went down that lifestyle, and one was a huge success. So there's like, what happened? How did you both end up where you are today? They both had the exact same answer. I had an abusive father. The one used it and created a bunch of shame and guilt within himself and got hooked on drugs and ended up being homeless. The other one said, I don't want to end up like he was. I'm going to be an example for my kids. I'm going to build something great. So it's all the way we look at things that we can create something new in our life. So life's not happening to us, it's happening for us, then it's happening by us, then it's happening through us. So not only for us and what we want to create, but how can we affect the people around us? And that's what brought that to mind. You're talking about that lady did it for her 17-year-old daughter, because the things that you are doing are affecting everyone around you. So when you have that higher level of perspective, you get to come out of this victim blaming, complaining mode into, man, I'm going to create something amazing that's going to impact others around me.
Yeah, and so much of that comes back to choices. I mean,
Mm, yeah.
yeah, I have a close family member who it seems like sometimes we say we could write a chapter book about this particular person, because it just seems like there have been a sequence of just poor decisions or poor choices that lead to a lot of drama in this person's life, right? And it's like, how can you help somebody understand that, like, the choice of being in that environment is what led to that mishap, or it led to that thing, right? So it all comes back to like our choices. And I think one huge thing that you sort of touched on, but again, calling attention to it, is this idea of really putting yourself in the room of greatest potential, or putting yourself, putting yourself in the position where you're surrounded by other like-minded people, or positive people. I know for me, like when I was working my corporate job, before I ever endeavored into entrepreneurship, this was over a dozen years ago. I mean, number one, I was in a comfort zone. So it was just like, this job's comfortable, whatever. But I didn't realize at the time that I was really around a lot of negative people, like the water cooler, so to speak, right? Like there was a lot of just like nagging and just, I don't know, unfortunate conversation happening. It wasn't until I started to get in the room with a lot of positive people, high level thinkers, these people who are encouraging each other, that you really even notice. Sometimes you don't even notice that you're in that until you experience what it's like to be around the opposite. So I think that just this idea of environment, like I'd love to touch
Mm-hmm.
on that too, because
Oh, yeah.
some of it is within our control, and then sometimes, like whether it's your job or whatever, like some things are out of your control. Also, like the people in your family, that's out of your control, right? Like we all
Yeah.
have that one family member who you're like, well, I can't like just totally dissociate from my mom or my dad or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case is, right? Like, so
Yeah.
it makes it challenging. So I'd love to touch on just environment and the people around us.
Yeah, because I think environment is huge. And speaking directly to family members, because that is tough, because you want to love them and be there for them. How you can protect yourself is not get into, like, if they're gossiping, don't gossip back with them. Listen to them, that maybe that's who they are. They need to get it out, but you don't join in, because you have to protect your mind. Your mind is a fertile ground. What you're allowing in comes out. Like I said earlier, your outside world is a reflection of your inner world. So make sure you are protecting yourself, and you can just be present with that person and just show them love in that time. And then a bigger part of the environment that we talked about is surrounding yourself with the right people. Because one of the good things that that does is, if you surround yourself with people that are further along in the journey that you are, it shows you what's possible. And you get to learn from them, the steps that they take, the mistakes that they made that you can avoid. You get to learn from their experience. But you actually get to realize too, like they're just normal people that had their own fears, worries, doubts that they overcame. So if they had that and achieved what I want, I can do this as well. So that's one of the beauties it does is it raises your awareness of what's possible. And I had a cool opportunity recently. I'm in Nashville. My dad's a video producer here, and he has a show. They were interviewing these songwriters, and one of the songwriters he wrote a George Jones and Tammy Wynette song back in the day. He's got some Grammy-winning songs. Wrote for Reba, George Strait, all these people. At the end of the interview, they're like, "Is there anything else you'd like the listeners to hear?" And he said, "I would have never made it anywhere in the music industry without connecting with the right people." And he said, I don't think anybody in the world today makes it in life without connecting with other great people. And I really do think that's what it's about. I believe relationships are rocket ships because not only can you learn from those people, but those people can actually help you achieve your goals and dreams. And that's one of the biggest questions I get from people is like, should you tell other people your goals and dreams? And the answer is yes and no. Don't tell the wrong people your goals and dreams because they'll tell you all the reasons why you can't have that. And you should never go for that. But if you tell the right people your goals and dreams, they'll help you. They'll help you achieve them. They'll connect you with other people that can help you along the way. So that's where you got to surround yourself with the right environment.
Yeah, I just read this. This reminds me of this meme I just saw on social media yesterday that I shared in my stories. And it was basically like, anybody who's criticizing you is not creating anything themselves. Right.
Yes.
So,
Yep. Oh,
and
yeah.
I was talking to someone who's kind of starting out on a new journey of entrepreneurship. And she was talking about how, family members and other people were sort of speaking to her like, well, you really think you can do that? Or you're already 45. Like, is this really what you want to do now? And questioning what she's doing. And she goes, I just decided, I think she said she'd heard it from like Mel Robbins or something, that like other people don't pay your bills, right? Number one. And number two is their opinions certainly don't pay your bills. But also, if they haven't done it, then you probably shouldn't pay attention to what they have to say, as far as whether or not you can do it. It all comes out of that whole comfort thing, right? The whole crabs in a bucket concept, right? Like the crab will pull up the other crab trying to get out of the bucket. Like that is life. And sometimes it is unfortunate that it is our family member or whatever the case is, but that's where the personal growth thing, right? That's where having the Tony Robbins in the back of your mind all the time is so powerful.
Yeah. And I think a great point with that too is realizing that, and we've heard that saying that hurt people hurt people. And a lot of times is realizing the people around you, they see the good that you're doing in the world and they feel less than. So what they want to do is pull you down to where they are. So they're and a lot of times they're not even doing it consciously. That's just ingrained in who they are. So they'll make comments, they'll do these underhanded little things, put in jabs to bring you down because they don't feel good about themselves. So realizing it's not personal to you, it's them. And so if it's about them, that actually gives me a peace to be like, hey, I'm just going to love you for who you are, but I'm not going to let you affect me. So I'm going to keep pushing forward.
Yeah. I'd love to know, you called yourself like a transformation coach. And so obviously you're working with people. You mentioned that you're running masterminds and that kind of thing. Like, I'd love to know, like, do you work with people on habits? Like, how does habits factor into, who we become? Is that something that you address with your clients? And if so, how?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think habits are important, but less than habits. And there's a couple things we'll go with here because I do believe a morning routine is important. A morning routine sets up your day, but an evening routine sets up your life. Because having an evening routine, not just preparing for bed, but actually doing mental rehearsal, visualization, things you can do right before you fall asleep of becoming the person you want to become will actually prime your subconscious mind while you're sleeping to become who you want to become. So then it comes down to a lot of the habits we create. And that's where I kind of deconstruct people's habits. It's very individual with what I do. Because a lot of people have all these steps to do in their morning routine. When really the whole point of a morning routine is to change the state that we're in and to create this positive energy that's going to set up my day right. So for some people, all you need to do is pray. If you're a believer, is praying and have gratitude. Gratitude and love are one of the most highest frequencies that will attract amazing things into your life. So I think the less is more approach, like you said with health. Sometimes it's just drinking more water. Sometimes it's just really having a solid gratitude practice. And I think a lot of people do gratitude wrong. They say, oh, yeah, I'm supposed to do gratitude. Let me make a list of the 10 things that I'm thankful for: my house, my car, my spouse, my kids. it's just a checklist. No, your gratitude, you're supposed to feel. Take the time to sit there and feel truly grateful for the things around you. I had the chance to talk with Dr. John D. Martini. He was in the movie The Secret, and he has a practice. He wrote a book years ago about gratitude. And we were on a Zoom call recently, and he showed me he's got journals and journals and journals of just gratitude. Every single day he adds to it. And now it's on a Google, there's a document on his computer that's 4,000 pages long. And he talks about even before he gets out of bed, he gets a tear of gratitude because he wants to feel so grateful for the day that he's about to have. So I do believe so. It comes from our thoughts and our feelings that create the actions and then the habits that we have. So first, it's overall looking at what are your daily habits because we're not aware of what we're doing. So look at those because there's probably some habits that you have that you can actually take away. But really, it starts with just little ones, plugging in some positive habits and then use yourself as a science experiment. When I do this, how do I feel? What thoughts do I have? What's my thinking, my feeling, my actions, and what results am I getting? But then you got to stay consistent. Consistency is key. A lot of people they'll meditate one time, be like, well, I didn't feel anything. That must not have worked. Well, it's the consistency, showing up every single day with the intention. So that's another thing. A big principle of mine is live by intention, not by default. Because I think way too many people are just going through the motions of life, just showing up and seeing what happens versus being intentional. How do I want this day to go? As you're falling asleep, what are my intentions for tomorrow? I had a guy recently, very successful business guy, wanted a better relationship with his daughter. And he was doing things. He was a great dad. I know him personally. But I said, well, what can you do tonight to be intentional with your daughter? Well, I can actually sit down and actually have a conversation and be interested in what she has to say. So every single day, that was one thing we worked with him. You're going to do something today to be intentional with your daughter, and it completely changed their relationship. So that was one of those 1-degree shifts. It wasn't doing something completely different. It was one thing today. I'm going to be intentional, and it restored their relationship. I've seen marriages restored. I've seen all these things happening just by intention, showing up intentionally.
That is so good. Yeah. And I just wrote down the word intention, and I wrote down, how do you want to feel? And this reminds me, again, kind of coming back to Brennan Burchard. He gave a keynote at an event I was at a couple of years ago, or actually a year ago. And he talked about how coming out of the pandemic for a couple of years, he said more than ever, people want to feel alive. He's like, they want to feel this sense of aliveness. Right. And that
Yeah.
reminds me so much of what you're saying. And I think a lot of people just react to their life. It's about what they have to do each day, not about what
Yeah.
they get to do each day. It's, there's very little that's put into the intention behind what's happening today. Like, I'm having lunch with my dear friend that I haven't seen in 3 months, right? So how do I want to feel going into that? But instead, we get caught up in, we're on our phones, or it's just another thing on the to-do list, right? It's just something that we're doing today. And I totally believe in this. I put so many stars next to my notes here because I think that this is just so huge. Is that I think what people need to realize is that your life is intended to be intentional. Like, the relationships that you have should be intentional. This is a silly story, but I have a little Post-it note that sits above both of my girls' bedroom doors. And usually, like, my cleaning crew moves it, and then I have to make a new one and put it up like every other week. But I just looked at it this morning and I was like, I want people to do this kind of thing. Like, it's been so powerful for me. And that is, when I go in to get them up in the morning, when I go in to get them dressed in the morning, there's a little note on the door that says they need their mom on her A game today. And it gives me a second before I enter that door, right? Brennan Burchard talks in his book about transitions. Walking through doorways is a transition, right? You're taking off your corporate hat from work and you're walking into your home for the day. Like, you're changing, you're entering a different space. There's different people in this space. You need to be a different person in that space, and that intention behind it. And it can be so powerful to do. I feel like I show up better as a mother because I'm walking into the room, and I sometimes it is a matter of like acting a little bit. Sometimes I am really tired, but it's like, I'm going to put on the smile. I'm so excited to see them, and I want them to feel that. Right. And that's what it's all about, is that sense of feeling. I love what you said about the gratitude thing, because I'm constantly talking about journaling, gratitude journaling. And I see it on social media all the time when people share in their stories, their gratitude journal list, right? Like, here's the 10 things I'm grateful for. And I love what you said about feeling it and the tear of gratitude, because it's just a totally different feeling, and experience when you can experience it that way. So
Yeah.
when you teach gratitude, like how does somebody really, is it just a matter of like sitting in that moment, like really thinking about something? Like I'll tell you what I do. It
Mhm.
started out for me a couple years ago, and I feel like I'm kind of going 100 directions, but it started for me a couple years ago where I thought, okay, I'm going to start gratitude journaling. And I felt stuck with it because I felt like I was writing down what you were saying. I was like, oh, I'm thankful for my husband. I'm thankful for my house, whatever. But I wasn't feeling it. I was just writing it
Mhm.
down. And so I changed it for myself. And this works for me. Instead of thinking about the individual things that I'm grateful for, I do it at the end of my day. And I have a journal that sits on my nightstand, and I write down the things or the people that I saw that day that had like things that happened, people that I saw that day that I'm grateful for. And I think back on those moments, and I think about
Mhm.
like, oh, I'm so, playing at the play set with my girls last night, teaching my daughter the monkey bars. Like that was a really cool moment. And that almost always does bring a tear because you're like, oh,
Mhm.
I'm reliving that moment, right? Like that's where the gratitude comes in. So I would love to hear from you, just like how to really emphasize this and how people can make it something that they practice.
Yeah, no, I think that's a huge practice that you just talked about. And that's something I do as well, is capture the magic moments. At the end of the day, what do we do? Here's the problem. I think most people downplay the stuff that they do throughout the day. Like if you were able to go to the playground with your child and be present with them, that is a magic moment. Like really feel that. Like even for me, at the end of this day, I've already done multiple podcast interviews today. Like just the fact that I get to have conversations with people like you, like this is amazing. Like I get to do this every single day. Like I'm going to be truly grateful for that. And one of the analogies I like to use is a kid on Christmas. Think about growing up on Christmas Day when you woke up and you were just so excited to wake up and, oh, Santa Claus has come. We're going to get presents. You had such an excitement for the day. What if you could create that every single day in your life? An excitement for the day. And I think that does start the night before, being truly grateful for the magic moments you had, and then putting the intention of how can I create more of these tomorrow? And you create this feeling, you get excited. Get excited to wake up that next morning and go through the day just to look for the magic moments. And there's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system, which is our filter that shows us what to actually focus on. Because we have 16 trillion bits of information throughout the day coming into our awareness, but we don't see most of it. You think about it, you're driving down the interstate, you don't see most of the billboards unless you actually look at them. But I drive a Jeep Wrangler. There's a thing that we do as Jeep drivers, you got a Jeep wave. So now whenever I'm driving, I'm not even aware that there's Jeeps around, but all of a sudden there's a knowing because my reticular activating system is primed to see Jeeps everywhere. And because so we can wave at each other, do the Jeep wave. That's what's going to happen in your life as you start to prime your subconscious mind to look for magic moments. You'll start to realize, man, even we had dinner and we actually set our phones down and had a conversation. That's a magic moment. You'll start celebrating these things in your life and you'll create an excitement every single day to wake up like a kid on Christmas, not for the gifts and the stuff, but for the interactions you can have with people. One of the things I love that you do that, you put that the note, because that does set the intention. It reminds you of what to do. And I usually have it up here, but I use this illustration on at a conference I just spoke at. But I have a whiteboard that I had in college, and it still has the organic chemistry on there that wouldn't come off the whiteboard. But there was a note on that I had every single day walking out of my apartment door that said, "Make a difference in someone's life today." Think about it. As a college kid, you're not thinking about that. You're just go to class, study, what am I going to eat tonight? Like that's usually what's on your mind. When I looked at that every single day, make a difference in someone's life today, I showed up different. I looked for opportunities to put a smile on somebody's face, to have a conversation where normally I would just walk past someone. So those little things can help set the intention that can be that 1 degree shift that changes everything. So I love that you do that practice, but then you're setting that up for your daughter. Like you're showing by example of, hey, what's possible. Like if kids grew up like this today, if every single person did that, this whole world would be different. So
Yeah.
again, that's life happening through you.
Well, and it's so interesting because I just took my youngest today to a play class. We go to a play class every Thursday together, and it's like a little toddler indoor playground type thing. And I walk in, and every week I'm always so astounded at the number of moms who look exhausted. And trust me, I totally get it.
Mm,
Like when you have
yep.
little ones, you're just tired, right? Most of us all are in yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, and our hair looks like we've been using dry shampoo for 4 days, right? Like that's how we all
Right,
look.
right.
But I'm always so interested in, like, sometimes I feel like I talk to people or I say hi or good morning or whatever, and I feel like there's a sense of energy and vibrancy, and maybe that's because I'm doing that with intention. But so many times it's reciprocated with just like almost this look of like, oh, hi, like people don't live this way. And I
Right, yeah.
see this happen too with my 6-year-old. Is very outgoing, very friendly. And if she comes with me into the grocery store, right, she's very friendly to the cashier. She's like, hi, good morning. And so many times people look at you with this like foreign look of like, oh, like you're talking to me, right? Like we've come so far from that sense of vibrancy and energy and connection. And I'm sure a lot of it has to do with just the past few years. But I do believe, like, wholeheartedly in this whole idea of living with intention, knowing how you want to feel, like living in that sense of aliveness. And sometimes if it takes a sticky note to remind you to be that way, like it does for me, then so be it.
Yep.
Right. And it's just like,
Yep.
I think, I can't think of the guy's name right now, but Atomic Habits, the guy that wrote Atomic Habits,
Yeah. James Clear.
He talks about like habit stacking, right? Like if you're somebody who's kind of coming back to that, what we talked about earlier, that idea of, well, I want to, right? Or I'm trying to, well, how can you move that from trying to committed? One thing I said to myself for years was, I want to try to do meditation. Like I had heard about it so much, like listening to podcasts, and I'm like, yeah, I probably need to do that. Like for me, it was just this constant, I need to, or I'm trying to, right? But I wasn't actually trying to, like, I just was saying that I was trying to. And so when I read that Atomic Habits book, I was like, oh, well, I should just habit stack this. I should just make my meditation connected to something that I'm definitely doing every day, whether that's brushing my teeth or making my cup of coffee, right? So every morning while my coffee brews, we have the world's slowest coffee maker, but it takes like by the time you fill the beans and all that stuff, it's like 5 minutes or so to actually brew the coffee. So while my coffee is brewing, I turn on like a verbal meditation, something that's like on Audible, or sometimes I use like my Aura Ring app. And I do that meditation there. Like I literally will just sit down and I do that while the coffee's brewing. And I'm doing it. There's a difference between like I'm trying to or whatever, and I'm intentionally doing it. So we talked about so many things. I mean, I have pages of notes just for my own sake. And I just think that we've talked about so much as it pertains to just awareness and understanding that you're made for more and the sense of purpose, but also so much further than that, into like the role of environment, creating magic moments, living in gratitude and living with intention. So much good stuff. And I honestly could talk to you for probably 2 more hours, but I want to be mindful of your time. Also, I just had to chime in and say, we are also Jeep people. We own 2 Jeeps. So as
So
I almost wanted to like raise the 2 fingers and wave. But I'd love for you, just as we wrap up, to tell people how they can find you or work with you, or where they can find you on social media, the podcast. Give us all the details, and then I'll make sure that we link it up in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely. And just one thing that came to mind that I want to share that may give some freedom to people when it comes to their habits, because one, I think it goes back to the vision. Who do you want to become? Set the vision for this higher version of yourself, and then look at what habits would they have. And then one of the things I do with my clients, we have them write out all their habits on a habit tracker. But this isn't to be judgmental of yourself. This is not, I have to have every single thing done on this list every single day to make it a win. This is back to that point that you are your own science experiment. This is for you to view and say, okay, over this week, these are the habits I did, and this is how I felt about it. And then I realized, then you can look at it over the month, and you're like, well, when I was, for a period of those days that I was meditating, I actually felt better. And when then I fell off, they don't judge themselves. When I fell off meditating, there was no judgment. I just realized, no, I actually felt better when I was meditating. So use a habit tracker to say, these are the ones I want to do. Because one, it keeps those habits top of mind. Because a lot of times, I forgot to meditate, or I forgot to do gratitude. I forgot to do these things. So having a list keeps it top of mind, but then don't judge yourself if you fall off track with those. Use it as an overall experiment of, okay, when I'm doing these things, check in with yourself. How do I feel? Okay, I felt better when I was doing these things. I want to do these more regularly. So I just wanted to say that. And then to find me, Go to mindshiftlinks.com and I'll give you the link to that. But mindshiftlinks.com, I've got a bunch of free resources there. Connect with me on Instagram at Dr. Justin Moseley, or my website's drjustinmoseley.com. And yeah, love to hear if anything that I said today helped in any way. I'd love to hear that. That's why we do this. I know that's why you do this podcast. It's just to make a difference in others' lives. So thank you for having me here.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and sharing all of your wisdom and everything. Obviously, you're not done and you're made for more, and you're doing that. Yeah. Your purpose is being fulfilled through everything that you're doing. I have to say this just because I know my female listeners are, they're used to hearing me talk about hormones. Everything that we just said about habits, I just want the woman listening to understand and hear this. Because your energy shifts over the course of the month, there are going to be certain times of that month that you're not feeling into things like maybe meditation, or there might even be times where you're not feeling into your exercise program, right? This is where it's important to recognize that female physiology is unique. And there are times of our cycle where we can actually be more productive on our to-do list. And then there's other times of the month where we're actually better equipped to just be more introverted and to actually be creating that list. And so just know that, like, if you're somebody who is struggling with habits, if you're like, I try to do this, but I fall off, there's probably a reason for that fall off, right? You're probably executing during phases where your estrogen's high and you're feeling more sociable and you're more into it. And then in the other phases of your cycle where your hormones are low, you might not be feeling it, right? So I want to give encouragement to that woman listening who's like, oh, why is it that I can't follow through? Like, why is it that I try so hard and then I fall short? Maybe by paying attention more to your physiology and your cycle, you can get more in alignment with that. So I had to say that.
No, that's a great, I'm glad you went there too, because that's where the mindset piece is so important in our health.
Yeah.
Because especially with women's, and my wife, she works with women's hormones. So I see it all the time. And there is, you do have to modify even your workouts around the way your body, you basically have a different cycle each week. Like you guys, your body is changing every single week.
Right.
The fact is, if we don't change our mindset and think, I have to do these things, we're looking at all these other successful people around us. These women are doing that. Well, we don't realize that they are actually going through the same thing that you are. They're having the same fears, worries, doubts. They're having the same off days. They're not getting these things done. So that's where it becomes a non-judgmental thing. It becomes just more of a tracking of my own body, my own physiology. How do these things come into play with me personally?
Yeah.
And I think there's a freedom there where we don't put our pressure on ourselves, and it reduces the stress in our life, which helps with our hormones as well. So yeah, it's definitely a powerful conversation, the mindset and hormones.
Yes, for sure. I just made a note for myself that that's a great future podcast as well. So awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, my friend, for being here. I'm so glad we connected. I will make sure to link up everything that you just gave us in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, friends, all you have to do is swipe up. I'll have all the links there for you. So thank you again so much for being here. I know we'll stay connected, but best of luck in everything you're doing. I can't wait to listen to some episodes of your podcast. And yeah, so I'm just so grateful we connected. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I love this conversation. Like you said, we could have done this for hours. So
Yes.
Yeah, love this. And yeah, I'm excited for what you're doing and the light you're bringing to the world.
Likewise, my friend. Okay, well, take care and we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
All right, thanks.